Today we're going to talk about navigating relationships after losing a loved one. As some of you guys may know, I do have another child, John Richardson, and John will be turning 35 years young this July. And when we lost Chrissy almost 4 years ago, he was 31 and Chrissy was 23. And so the relationship with John now post loss of Chrissy has changed. John's grief is different than mine because he lost his sister versus I lost my daughter. And it took me a little while to think about his loss in that perspective. John did not attend Chrissy's memorial service, and he was distant for about 2 years. He checked in periodically for important days like her birthday, holidays. He would check in by phone, but he relocated to Atlanta. And I don't know exactly why he moved to Atlanta, to the place where she actually passed. He never shared that with me, why he selected Atlanta, but that's where he landed. And I think his grief is actually, I'm not going to compare and say larger than mine, but it's so different than mine that, as he explained to me, he lost his best friend also. And so he lost that person that he could tell things to. He doesn't have another sibling. I think if he had another sibling, now this is just my thoughts, I think his grief would be different. But because he doesn't have another sibling, it's more impactful for him. For me, with my relationship with John, I really try to meet him where he's at. I think I'm gentler with him now. Now, there are times where I have to be a little stern with John during his grief because, again, he didn't attend the memorial service. And so when he came back and he shared with me the reason why he didn't attend the memorial service, he actually said to me, it was almost like he was doing it for me, because he shared with me that he knew, of course, the day she was being memorialized, so he was keeping up with everything, right? And he said that he knew if he came to the service, I would not be able to grieve. He's correct. If he would have been there, I would have only focused on him and not my grief. So I've had to navigate that thought perception publicly with some people who have said, why didn't he come? And some people actually thought it was very inconsiderate for him not to come. And I've had to sometimes defend that thought and his action now that I know why he didn't come. For anyone who has multiple children, hopefully you do, they're still with you, that you manage your conversations and your interactions with your surviving children literally one-on-one, that you personalize that interaction with them one-on-one. Your relationship would never be the same with those surviving children, because you become guarded for them. You know, you almost become so nervous about something happening to them as well, because you know it can happen because you've lost a child. Therapy has been so helpful for me. I start therapy and then I may end therapy 3 or 4 months. I may change the type of therapy from clinical to biblical therapy. I do both, alternating sometimes and sometimes at the same time. Right now I'm doing clinical therapy. I've shifted now from talking about my grief to now talking about my relationship with John, because that's where I need the most help now. And it is like talking to a friend, someone that has more experience than I do, because this is what they're trained in. And just in my therapy session just Monday, I got some useful tools in how to interact with John in my session. And so now I've shifted from talking about my grief for Chrissy to my relationship with John and how to navigate being his mother, but also wanting to be his friend and support him through his grief, and knowing that he is sad and knowing what that sadness looks like for him. Please, please, please seek seek out a therapist. You may go through a couple of different therapists like I did, but find someone you trust, someone that you can build that relationship with, and lean into them because they're going to help you. My first therapist I used for about 4 or 5 months through my EAP program through my job. And she was great. She got me through that hump, that initial shock. Even that moment of thinking, I'd rather be with Chrissy than to be here. Because that's a reality. When you lose someone, you do a lot of times feel like you'd rather join them. So you have to get on the other side of that. After I used that therapist for about 6 weeks, and then I realized, okay, she's taking me as far as I think she can take me in this grief process. And then I started talking to a couple of friends, and I said, I need a therapist, I need to find someone else. And they knew someone. In between her and finding her, I found out about Grief Share. And then I started Grief Share, and I did 12 weeks with Grief Share. And that really helped me during the gap of when I didn't have a clinical therapist. And then I really liked the Grief Share, and I did 2 sessions with Grief Share back to back. And then I found the clinical therapist later. John moved back in with me recently at the end of November 2024. And he shared with me that he had lost everything. He had lost Chrissy, which was the major loss in his life. But then he also ended a long-term relationship with a college girlfriend of about 12 years. And when he asked me about moving back in, I thought, this is going to be interesting. Should I say yes? Should I say no? And I said, okay. He's reaching out because he needs help. He needs to be surrounded with love because he's lost love. The 2 people he knew the longest in a relationship, his girlfriend of 12 years since college, and his sister. And you're here now asking me, your mother, can you move in with me? And I felt like if I would have said no, he would have really emotionally been devastated. And so I said yes. When a person asks for help, help them. A lot of times people don't have the capacity to ask for help. And we know what can happen in those situations. When they don't have capacity to ask for help, then depression sets in. They're typically already depressed. And then if you don't help them, depression sets in really harder and worse. And we know sometimes that leads to suicide. As much as we feel like we want to be stern, we want to say, you can do it, step up to the plate, handle your life, grow up. As much as we feel like that's an answer, certain circumstances, that's not the right answer. You have to meet that person where they are. The opportunity to say, I'm here for you. I can support you. I can, be here for you. We can get through this together. If you're struggling, asking for help, find someone that you trust. It doesn't have to be a family member. It can be a friend. It can be someone at your church, someone in your local community. Find someone that you can actually be transparent and be open and just pour your heart out to them. Fortunately for me with John, I live alone. I have accommodations that, hey, yeah, pick a room. You can move back home. Here's the guest room. This is your room. This bathroom is yours. It may not always be that simple that you can have someone to go home to. Even if you have to knock on the church door, just find someone. Find someone. It could be at your local YMCA is that's a wonderful place that you can find help. Find somebody that you can say, I need help. There's a phrase, I remember seeing it, I think on Google Images or somewhere, but family is key. This is true. Family is key, family is critical, and I'm so thankful for my family that I have a large family to lean on and to pour from. With that said, a lot of times family members, they want you to move along through your grief. It's time for you to move along. Sometimes you want to say to them, just let me grieve right here in this moment, just let me cry, let me fall apart, and then help pick me back up. But just let me fall apart. So I think people need to realize that falling apart or grieving in that moment of crying or having 5 minutes or even a day or a day or two or three that you need to not get out of bed, that you need to be emotional, that you need to not be happy, it's good for you. Because if you don't go through those steps, they get buried deep inside, and then they become an infection that you haven't tried to take care of, or you didn't take an antibiotic for. It's just buried inside of you, and then it's going to, it's going to morph into something even worse. Family members need to realize when you say today is not a good day, or you say I'm not feeling my best, or I need to scream, I need to cry. Hey, maybe say, well, let's scream and cry, do it together. I still have a couple of friends in my hometown, my high school friends, that I have not talked to since Chrissy passed. And every time I get ready to pick the phone up to talk to them, I get frozen.
Why is that?
I think because so much time has passed that I haven't talked to them, that my fear is that they're going to take me backwards to answer questions that I haven't answered with them. But I have to get over that and go ahead and do it. The more time I allow to be in between us, I don't think it's getting any better. Particularly for your friends, don't allow as much time to go between interacting with them, communicating with them, keeping that conversation open with them. Answer their questions as best as you can, and just be transparent with them. If they're asking too many questions, just tell them, hey, let's take a pause on that. Let's talk about something else. Tell me what you've been doing. Second thing I would say, as it relates to your children, when you're in this grief process, make sure that you're meeting your children where they are. Love them in the space that they are. Allow them to fall apart. And if you can, and hopefully you have the tools and the strength to help pick them back up. Because as parents, that's our responsibility. We never stop picking them up and putting on Band-Aids, and grief is no different. Let them know that you love them dearly and you're going to be there for them, and they're not alone. As long as they're not hurting themselves or anyone else, allow them to act out, allow them to have the space, allow them to become who they need to become in that moment of grief. Encourage them to do counseling. John has not done counseling. He says he's fine. I wish he would do counseling. Sometimes I actually do my counseling sessions on speaker, just so he can kind of hear some of the things we're talking about. Meet your children where they are. Allow them to grieve. Don't make them feel like you should be done, you should be finished grieving at this point, because you're never done grieving. Grieve as organically as you can. Release as much as you possibly can into the atmosphere. Give it to God as much as you can. Turn it over to your faith. Know that there are no 2 days the same. That's a good thing. You're going to forever be a parent who's grieving the loss of your child. And in that loss, there can be good days and bad days, and you're going to have strength. Depend on yourself to have strength. But depend on yourself to get you out of bed. Depend on yourself to allow you to cry and to weep when you need to. But also depend on yourself to be strong.